child that is possibly
What kind of marriage is this?
a circus.
Like, she just been to her girlfriend's house. To her girlfriend's house can mean really her boyfriend's house or both.
Every reason to doubt that you are one-year-old Keegan's biological father because of Mrs. Green's sexual track record. Wasn't ready to be married, and that he was the promiscuous one.
Yes, Your Honor.
You claim that you stepped outside of your marriage only when he left to be with other women.
She told me she going to the store for like an hour. She'd be gone for like 2 or 3 hours and get back. I asked her where she been. I don't think Burger King at 10 o'clock at night is crowded until like 1 in the morning. So this is what made me like not want to be with her.
Gone. Someone called me at work and told me that they dropped him off at the bus station.
Like, I flew back from Atlanta, like we said we was gonna get it together. You know what I'm saying? I flew back from Atlanta, came in the house,
where he
we're
left
chilling.
with another woman in Atlanta. Damn, I did. And he would have also had another child during that point. If
Allegedly.
Still...
Let me get this together.
This court case unfolds before Judge Lauren Lake, where emotions, legal responsibility, and biological truth collide on the evidence stage. What begins as a question about paternity quickly becomes a deeper examination of trust, regret, and the fragile relationship between law and justice. The courtroom is filled with people who believe they knew the truth about their families, only to discover that a DNA test can rewrite an entire life story in a matter of minutes. At the center of the case is a man who has spent years raising a child he believed was his son. He arrives in court carrying both love and fear, love for the child he has bonded with, and fear that the truth may take everything away. Opposite him is the child's mother, who admits that during the time of conception, she was involved with another man. Her admission immediately changes the tone of the proceedings. This is no longer just about a relationship that failed. It is about accountability, honesty, and the long-term consequences of hiding the truth. Judge Lauren Lake guides the case with clarity, emphasizing that the courtroom is not a place for assumptions but for evidence. The DNA test becomes the most powerful piece of proof, standing above emotions, arguments, and personal narratives. As the judge explains, many people regret taking a DNA test, but avoiding the truth does not protect anyone. It only delays the inevitable. In this courtroom, truth changes everything. The evidence stage in this divorce-related dispute reveals how deeply personal decisions can turn into legal consequences. The man explains how he signed the birth certificate, gave the child his name, and shaped his entire identity around being a father. He describes sleepless nights, first steps, birthdays, and emotional milestones that created an unbreakable bond in his heart. For him, biology feels irrelevant compared to years of lived experience. Yet the law requires clarity, especially when child support, parental rights, and future responsibilities are at stake. The mother testifies about guilt and fear, fear of losing a good man, fear of disrupting her child's stability, and fear of facing the consequences of her actions. Her story reflects many real-life DNA test cheating stories, where secrecy feels easier than honesty until the truth surfaces in court. Judge Lake reminds her that the court does not exist to shame, but to resolve disputes with fairness and transparency. Still, the emotional weight of her choices is impossible to ignore. As the hearing progresses, the judge addresses the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice is not just about punishment or reward. It is about balancing truth with responsibility. The relationship between law and justice becomes clear as Judge Lake explains that the law must rely on facts, even when those facts cause pain. Emotional bonds matter, but legal determinations must be grounded in evidence. The courtroom audience listens closely as legal principles like adverse inference in the Evidence Act are discussed in simple terms. The judge explains that avoiding tests, delaying proceedings, or withholding information can lead the court to draw conclusions that may not favor the party avoiding the truth. This moment highlights why transparency is critical in family court, and why DNA testing has become a decisive tool in modern justice systems. This case also touches on broader social issues often discussed in platforms like the Truth Changes Everything podcast and the Game Changing Attorney podcast, where legal experts analyze how one decision can alter generational outcomes. The judge points out that when adults make choices without considering long-term consequences, children often pay the highest price. That is why the court must act carefully, especially when determining paternity and child support obligations. As the proceedings continue, adoption stories and full episodes of similar cases are referenced to show that family is not always defined by biology alone. Judge Lake acknowledges that many families are built through adoption, love, and commitment rather than DNA. However, she also emphasizes that the court's role is to establish legal truth so that informed decisions can be made about custody, support, and parental rights. The tension in the room increases as the DNA results approach. The man expresses uncertainty, admitting that part of him fears the truth while another part needs closure. This emotional conflict reflects why people regret taking DNA tests, not because the test is wrong, but because the truth forces irreversible decisions. Judge Lake calmly explains that closure, even when painful, is better than living in doubt. When the results are finally revealed, the courtroom experiences a defining moment. The outcome determines not only biological paternity, but also the future direction of the family. Relief, shock, and emotional release follow almost instantly. The judge carefully explains the legal meaning of the results, ensuring that everyone understands what has changed and what remains the same. Beyond biology, the judge addresses the importance of responsibility. Whether the man is confirmed as the biological father or not, the emotional bond he has formed is real. Judge Lake highlights that the court recognizes emotional investment but must also protect the child's legal and financial future. This is where Supreme Court child support principles come into play, ensuring that children are supported according to law, not emotion alone. The case becomes a powerful lesson in accountability and growth. The mother is encouraged to reflect on her actions and understand how honesty could have prevented years of confusion. The father figure is reminded that love and commitment carry weight, but informed choices must guide the future. Judge Lake closes this phase of the case by reinforcing the idea that the court is not the end of healing. It is often the beginning. In the broader context, this courtroom story aligns with themes discussed in platforms like Celebrate Recovery Testimonies and the Divorce Course podcast, where individuals share how facing hard truths led to personal transformation. The judge's final words stress that learning from mistakes is essential, especially when children are involved. This case demonstrates how a single DNA test can redefine family structures, challenge personal identities, and reinforce the role of the court as a place where truth, not assumption, prevails. It shows that while the process can be painful, it is necessary to protect the future of everyone involved. Most importantly, the child at the center of it all. As the courtroom moves deeper into the case, Judge Lauren Lake reframes the discussion away from blame and toward responsibility. She explains that family court is not designed to punish past mistakes, but to determine the truth so that everyone, especially the child, can move forward with clarity. This moment highlights why so many people who step onto the evidence stage underestimate the emotional power of legal proceedings. Once sworn testimony begins, personal secrets transform into legal facts. The judge carefully walks both parties through how the court evaluates evidence in a divorce-related paternity dispute. She reminds them that emotions do not outweigh proof. Text messages, timelines, admissions of infidelity, and sworn statements all carry weight, but none compare to the final authority of a DNA test. This is why so many cases discussed on platforms like The Truth Changes Everything podcast focus on courtroom moments like this, because the shift from belief to verified truth is irreversible. The man explains how discovering doubts about paternity felt like a slow emotional collapse. He describes how suspicion did not arrive suddenly, but crept in through inconsistencies, unexplained absences, and messages that did not make sense. Judge Lake listens closely, then explains that many people regret taking a DNA test not because it creates pain, but because it confirms pain they already feel. The test does not destroy trust. It exposes where trust was already broken. The woman admits that fear drove her silence. Fear of losing stability, fear of raising a child alone, fear that the truth would cost her everything she had built. Judge Lake points out that fear-based decisions often lead to the most damaging outcomes in family court. The law expects honesty because dishonesty delays justice and magnifies harm. This explanation reflects the deeper relationship between law and justice. Law demands facts, while justice seeks fairness once those facts are known. As testimony continues, the judge addresses how adverse inference in Evidence Act principles apply in family court. When someone avoids testing, withholds information, or changes their story, the court is allowed to question credibility. Judge Lake makes it clear that transparency protects everyone involved, especially children whose futures depend on accurate legal determinations. This explanation grounds the case in legal reality rather than emotional debate. The discussion then shifts to the child's identity. Judge Lake emphasizes that children do not choose the circumstances of their birth. They inherit the consequences of adult decisions. Whether a DNA test confirms or denies biological paternity, the emotional bond formed over years cannot be dismissed lightly. However, the court must still define legal responsibility, particularly when it comes to child support and parental rights under Supreme Court child support standards. The man acknowledges that regardless of the result, he feels like a father. Judge Lake validates this feeling while clarifying that emotional fatherhood and legal fatherhood are not always the same. This distinction is critical in jurisprudence. The concept of justice in jurisprudence requires courts to recognize human experience while enforcing legal structure. Without that balance, rulings would become inconsistent and harmful. The courtroom atmosphere grows heavier as the judge explains what happens after the results. If the man is confirmed as the biological father, his legal responsibilities remain unchanged, but trust within the relationship must be rebuilt or accepted as broken. If he is not the biological father, new decisions must be made about his role in the child's life. Judge Lake stresses that walking away is not the only option, but it must be an informed one. This moment echoes many adoption stories, full episodes where non-biological parents choose to remain present out of love rather than obligation. Judge Lake notes that some of the strongest families are built through choice, not DNA. Still, she reinforces that choice must come after truth, not before it. As the court prepares for the results, Judge Lake addresses personal growth. She speaks directly to the mother about accountability and self-reflection, a message often echoed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies. Healing begins when people stop justifying harmful behavior and start owning it. The judge explains that honesty is not just a legal requirement, it is a foundation for any healthy family structure. The man reflects on how uncertainty has affected his mental and emotional health. He describes sleepless nights and constant doubt, questioning memories that once felt secure. Judge Lake explains that unresolved paternity disputes often cause long-term emotional damage, which is why courts push for resolution rather than delay. Justice delayed, she reminds them, is justice denied. The courtroom audience witnesses how a single legal process can dismantle years of assumptions. This is why cases like this are frequently analyzed on platforms such as the Game Changing Attorney podcast and the Divorce Course podcast. Legal professionals often emphasize that family court cases are not just about winning or losing. They are about minimizing future harm. When the DNA envelope is finally referenced again, the judge pauses. She uses this moment to remind everyone that results do not define worth. Biology answers one question, but character answers many others. Judge Lake emphasizes that regardless of the outcome, the adults in this case must act in the child's best interest going forward. The anticipation underscores why DNA test cheating stories resonate so deeply with audiences. They reveal how quickly stability can collapse when truth is withheld. Judge Lake's calm authority anchors the courtroom, ensuring that emotions do not override reason. As the judge explains the legal implications of each possible outcome, she reinforces the importance of informed decision-making. If the man remains involved in the child's life, it must be based on clarity, not confusion. If legal ties are severed, emotional healing must still be addressed. The court can rule on law, but recovery requires personal effort. This part of the case illustrates the court's role as a turning point rather than a final destination. Judge Lake makes it clear that the ruling is not the end of the story. It is the moment where a new chapter begins, guided by truth rather than uncertainty. By this stage, the courtroom story has evolved beyond paternity alone. It has become a lesson in responsibility, honesty, and the long-term impact of decisions made in secrecy. Judge Lake's guidance shows how the justice system, when applied correctly, can bring clarity even in the most emotionally charged situations. The case stands as a powerful reminder that while truth can be painful, it is also stabilizing. Once the facts are known, people can rebuild on solid ground. And in family court, that stability is not just a legal goal, it is a moral one. As Judge Lauren Lake brings the case toward its conclusion, the courtroom reaches a moment where emotion and law intersect with full force. The judge reminds everyone present that family court decisions do not erase the past, but they do define the future. What has unfolded here is not simply a dispute over biology. It is a clear example of how truth, once revealed, reshapes responsibility, identity, and trust. Judge Lake explains that many people enter court believing the law will validate their feelings. Instead, the law validates facts. This is why DNA testing carries such weight. A DNA test does not consider love, sacrifice, or history. It answers one precise question. And that answer, once spoken in court, becomes part of the permanent legal record. This is why people regret taking DNA tests, not because the science is flawed, but because the truth forces them to confront realities they avoided for years. The judge carefully summarizes what the court has heard: admissions of infidelity, timelines that overlap, emotional bonds formed without certainty, and years of silence driven by fear. Each of these elements played a role in bringing the case to this point. On the evidence stage, every statement mattered. Judge Lake emphasizes that the court is not here to judge character, but to evaluate actions and consequences. Attention then turns to the child at the center of the case. Judge Lake speaks firmly about the responsibility adults have to protect children from uncertainty whenever possible. Children deserve stability, honesty, and clarity. When adults hide the truth, children inherit confusion. This is why family court exists, to restore order where personal decisions created disorder. The judge reinforces how the relationship between law and justice operates in cases like this. The law establishes facts and obligations. Justice considers how those facts affect real lives. When applied together, they ensure fairness without favoritism. This balance defines the concept of justice in jurisprudence, especially in emotionally charged family disputes. As the ruling becomes clear, Judge Lake addresses the emotional reality of the man who stepped forward believing he was a father. She acknowledges his commitment, his bond, and the years he invested. She explains that love does not disappear because of a test result. However, legal fatherhood must be clearly defined so that future decisions, custody, child support, and parental authority are made with certainty, not assumption. The judge then addresses the mother directly. She speaks about accountability without cruelty, making it clear that growth begins when excuses end. Judge Lake explains that honesty at the beginning could have prevented years of emotional strain. This message mirrors themes often heard in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where people confront their mistakes and rebuild through accountability rather than denial. Judge Lake also discusses how child support obligations are determined under Supreme Court child support principles. These laws exist to protect children, not punish parents. Financial responsibility follows legal parentage, and the court's duty is to ensure that children are supported in a way that reflects both fairness and law. Emotion alone cannot determine these outcomes. The judge reminds both parties that today's ruling closes one legal chapter, but opens another personal one. Whether the relationship continues or ends, the truth now provides a foundation for informed choices. This moment reflects discussions commonly explored on platforms like the Divorce Course podcast, where legal clarity is described as the first step toward emotional healing. Judge Lake also addresses the broader implications of cases like this. DNA test cheating stories resonate with audiences because they reveal how secrecy destabilizes families. The judge explains that deception often begins small, but grows into something unmanageable. Family court becomes the place where those hidden decisions are finally addressed. She cautions against repeating the same patterns in the future. Learning from this experience is essential, not just for the adults involved, but for the child who will grow up shaped by their decisions. Judge Lake emphasizes that children learn more from actions than explanations. As the court prepares to adjourn, Judge Lake reinforces a final legal lesson. Avoiding the truth does not protect anyone. Courts can draw conclusions through adverse inference in Evidence Act principles when parties attempt to withhold information. Transparency is not just encouraged, it is necessary for justice to function properly. The judge's closing remarks bring the focus back to growth and responsibility. She explains that while the court can determine paternity, only the individuals involved can determine how they move forward emotionally. Healing does not happen automatically with a ruling. It requires effort, maturity, and consistent honesty. This case stands as a powerful example of how one courtroom decision can redefine family dynamics. It reflects the realities discussed in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal professionals emphasize that family law cases often leave deeper emotional impacts than criminal trials. The stakes are not freedom or fines, but identity, belonging, and trust. Judge Lake concludes by reminding everyone that truth is not the enemy. Fear of truth is. Once the truth is known, people regain control over their choices. That clarity, while painful, is also empowering. The courtroom story ends not with celebration or defeat, but with resolution. The uncertainty that once dominated this family's life has been replaced with facts. And while facts cannot heal wounds on their own, they allow healing to begin. This case demonstrates why family court remains one of the most emotionally demanding areas of the justice system. It is where personal lives meet legal standards, and where private decisions become public record. Judge Lauren Lake's guidance shows how firm application of the law, paired with empathy, can bring order to emotional chaos. In the end, the lesson is clear. Truth changes everything. It changes how people see each other. It changes legal responsibility. It changes the future of a child. And once spoken in court, it cannot be taken back. This is not just a courtroom story. It is a reminder that honesty, though difficult, is the only path toward real stability, for families, for children, and for justice itself.